Welcome back, everybody. My name is Gammatrap, one word, and this is our tutorial series where we cover fire. Now, we've got different sizes and styles ready, and each of these will be in their own video, just so you don't have to hunt around or wait through a very long video. You can just pick the video in the series that you're looking for, or you can watch them all for a slightly more comprehensive view and understanding of fire. Now, we've got small and medium and large. Each of them have a realistic and stylized version to them, as you could probably see here down below. Now, they've all been made, but if you don't see the links in the description down below, that means they haven't been published yet. Make sure to subscribe with the notifications on if you'd like to catch those. But for now, let's get started. Okay, so now we're moving on to the huge column of fire stylized edition. So we did the small flames, both realistic and stylized. Then we did the medium flames, both realistic and stylized. And then we just did the realistic huge bonfire column of flame. And now we're doing the stylized version. Now, in the comments down below, if you'd like me to do another type of flame, we can add it to this playlist, like a directional flame, like a spell, like a flamethrower, you know? I'm just trying to think of like fire, like being forced in a direction, like firebending, I guess. It's a pretty good one. But first, what we're going to do is the colors that we're working with are just going to be the same colors we've been doing for the other stylized pieces, just these two colors right here. That's the red and then our yellow. So we're first going to start with our red, and we're going to get a brush nice and big. Now, like with all the other ones, our brush is our hard round pressure opacity brush. We're going to turn off the size variation of pressure so that we have an even size. And this is just a personal preference. You could totally keep the size one on if you'd like. Size works great, especially for the stylized version that we're going to do now, but personally, I'm not a big fan of it. What we're going to do is, here's the scale, okay? This is a torch, like something a human would hold. Just imagine a little human about this big holding that torch. We're going to make a column of fire about yay big, right? We're going to make a big stylized column of flame. And I just brought this here for the scale. This was actually, by the way, our if you haven't seen the video yet, our realistic medium-sized flame. But I shrink it down, now it's tiny. Anyway, so now let's get started with the real show here. So first you get your brush nice and big and you pick the vibrant red. And we're just going to think of, we have it moved to the side, kind of like the other big flame. And we're going to have this one resting on the column as well. Now, if you haven't seen the other stylized versions, there's 3 rules of thumb I pretty much go by, right? That is shapes in shapes, meaning, like, here's a shape that I made. Right now I'm cutting round shapes inside it. The rule of cool and don't be boring. Those 3 tenets should treat you right. Now, with big flames, especially big stylized flames, you have to treat them more like a liquid. And I've mentioned this before a few times in these stylized flame pieces. Now, you'll notice that when we're cutting these shapes inside these shapes, I'm making round, like really sharp round cuts. Now, if you imagine these are actual circles, they would look something like that. Now, what you're gonna want to try and do is with like a liquid-looking stylized flame. If a flame is moving really fast in a direction, it's going to, look like that. But same with it's going up and to this side over here. So the force of the exertion that the flame is making itself go by, because it's so massive, it's making these waves kind of come out. So you just trace around the edges here. Not every single one of them, but every couple. Close you get towards the top. And you don't have to make them too crazy. You can make them pretty thin. Just the indication that it's kind of trailing in that wake is probably just fine. Let's add a little extra over here. Kind of fill this space in a bit more. I'm gonna cut a shape right there. Cut like that. Now let's actually make it a little thicker. Cut in right there. Yeah, now we're just trying to make an interesting shape here. And I want this to be a column, roughly speaking, just a giant, huge mound of flame. Now, I've seen a few times, and I've drawn this a few times, where the stylized flame almost looks like a cloud with bumps and ridges, and that works great too. It's completely up to you. As long as it looks cool and it is not boring, then I mean, it works, right? So let's actually add some interesting spiral stuff, because when the bigger you make the fire, the more you can add cool elements. And I've always loved adding spiral-like elements, kind of going around in these columns of flame. I'm going to add a little extra up here, because I want this to be pretty, a little more straight and rigid than what we got right now. And if it looks like it's not quite working out, just fill in more color and cut in different shapes. That's pretty good. I'll cut these up a bit though. The main thing when it comes down to don't be boring, if it's predictable, that's boring. So if it's like a uniform, these all look the same, they all kind of line up, you know, that's pretty boring. So you want to make sure that if it's weighted on one side, it might asymmetrical stuff can look really cool. And as long as you make it look cool, then it could be a really good stylized flame. All right, now let's cut into the bottom a bit. Let's add just a little baby flames down here. And we'll make them have interesting shapes by just kind of cutting into them. Just like that. Let's actually reduce the size of this one. Okay, that's pretty good. All right. Now, also when you're doing a spiral kind of thing like this, if you decide to make a flame like this, you can actually communicate the spiral also through the I like to call it the feet. if the fire's moving in that direction, right? You can also make the legs, you could say, the bottom of the fire also kind of spiral in that direction by just kind of cutting almost like a razor blade sort of fashion, right? Now we're going to grab our yellow, and here comes the juice of our flame. We're just going to load it up with yellow. And we're going to remember where these little lines are, and we're going to kind of continue them on this flame here. This is slowly going to make a little more sense the more we get into this. So, with the internal color of this fire, we're going to keep in mind the shapes we've already started, like the spiral, and we're also going to consider that it looks, or it's supposed to look, kind of liquid in this sort of state. So, we're going to make shapes and shapes. We're going to cut the red by just selecting the red and painting into it, changing your brush size from time to time to make sure it's not, make it a little random, a little chaotic. And you could take this and follow under the spiral, almost like the spiral has a shadow. And you can add some interesting shapes and cuts into the actual branch of the spiral itself to keep things nice and interesting. But we're going to keep on cutting our little shapes here. Now again, we don't want these to be uniform shapes. So like this, it's like, okay, yeah, you got a bump there, bump, 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 bump. We don't want uniformity. Uniformity is boring. We want all these shapes to be kind of random. We don't want shapes that look the same. We're going to make a little shadow spiral down on the bottom of this one. We're going to add some custom spiral there. shadow spiral down there. We're going to grab our yellow. And then we're going to work on this one up here. Add a bit of a shadow to that. And see, when we're adding a shadow, while also working with the yellow, kind of going into our little branches, I like to call them, little spiral branches, it makes it look like the flame is really moving. It's really going in those crazy patterns. So we're going to add a couple dots, because when you add dots, it makes the flame look just a little bit more liquid, but you don't want to just constantly add dots everywhere. Just a couple, and you know, make sure that they're all different sizes. You can add some dots inside the flame. Just make sure you kind of cut every shape you make into a different shape. Because that really helps sell the whole "don't be boring" thing. Let's actually have kind of like how I made the shadows for these spiral branches. We can do the same if we're careful to help sell the spirals on the bottom. By adding little variations. We can really make it look like there's spirals going all up and down this thing. So if there's a lot of yellow in one area, feel free to add little red dots. If there's a lot of red in an area, feel free to add little yellow dots and lines and shapes and cuts. Every time we add a splotch of yellow or a splotch of or a splotch of red, then make sure that you make sure you keep cutting into it. And now that we have a solid idea of the shape of our spiral, we can sort of start cutting into and erasing the actual fire itself. Now, here's the interesting thing. You can always add more little embers and external fires, kind of going around and accentuating the spiral that you made. As long as you put some blobs and then cut interesting shapes out of them, you can pretty much get away with anything. I almost kind of like that for a second. There we go. Now we're going to make our brush really small. We can add little threads, both going into our yellow area, as well as leaving the actual fire itself. If they don't work, the beautiful part is you can always erase them. Just want to break up some of these lines. So let's add a nice curvy shape, and then we cut our little circles out of them. Keep things filled in, but keeping it a little chaotic at the same time. Now, the way you can always make fire look liquid is wherever there's a lot of mass, you can add little round shapes. Not quite circles, but they're not connected, and they've got a little thin bit of red between them. This almost makes it look like bubbles, which really helps sell the whole, fire is liquid kind of argument. That you're trying to sell, right? Keep it interesting. Make sure none of them are the same size. And let's sharpen up these feet real quick. Also making sure they're not uniform. Remember, we don't want things to be the same. We want them to all be different. It's a Bob Ross moment where he's talking about how everyone's unique and special in their own way. Good old Bob. All right, making sure our little baby flames have a little bit of girth to them. We're going to add a little bit of yellow to those, just a little bit. And we're not going to let the yellow touch the sides. Here we go. Let's actually draw these feet down just a little bit more. Shows the column, the platform that it's on, to have like a little bowl shape to it. We're going to add the yellow coming down a bit more as well. Make sure there's solid shapes though. We don't want them to be too fuzzy. One of the best parts about stylized flame, for example, is that you can cut some solid and very sharp shapes. All right, let's actually work on this top area here because we haven't actually touched this yet. And we're just going to cut shapes. Just like we've been doing. Nice, sharp shapes. Little circles. Sort of blend in with everything. Yeah, there we go. All right. Stylized fire always tends to be a little faster. Just because, you know, it's chaotic, it's crazy. There's very simple rules. Now, the last touch, just like all the other stylized flames, is we're just going to get our brush and we're going to get a soft brush. So soft round pressure opacity is fine, another default brush. And we're going to grab the red color and we're going to make a new layer. Now the reason for this, just like the other ones, is if we do a soft brush of light on our flame layer, it's going to really diffuse the shapes, which kind of defeats the point of making the shapes in the first place. So we make a new layer and go into our blending options, and we can pick either color dodge or linear dodge. I personally prefer linear dodge just because it's more predictable. And with a soft brush, I'm gently just going to follow along the main column of flame. Now the reason we do the blending layer is because if I push really hard, it still preserves the shapes that I made. And if you use too much, and if it starts taking away from the actual shape of the flame, you can just get another soft brush and just kind of gently erase over it until you've got a basic glow that you want. Now we're going to grab the yellow, shrink the size of the brush, and we're just going to add a little extra yellow right in the middle of the yellow. And this is going to make the middle part of the yellow kind of really like extra bright, like real hot and bright flame. Right? Now I think that's pretty good. Like I said, this covers the entire list. Give yourself a round of applause if you've actually watched all 6 of these tutorials and you now have and you've practiced along with me. These are pretty small. These are pretty bite-sized chunks, little tiny tutorials about fire. Now I plan on making more about like ice and stone and all these other little elements and cool effects and stuff, both in realistic or semi-realistic and stylized and maybe different styles. Let me know in the comments what you would like to see, because I really appreciate every comment, even the kind of dumb ones. I appreciate the humor because most of them are just made jokes. I really appreciate how most people are really positive in the comment section. I know that's kind of rare for some people, but I really appreciate it. If you'd like to see more tutorials, click one of the videos that are popping up on the screen right now, and if you've already seen these tutorials, then you can go to my playlist of just tutorials, or check out a very more specific tutorial playlist, just like this one's a fire playlist. Feel free to like the video if you liked it or found it useful or educational. Subscribe to see more tips, tricks, and tutorials, as well as time lapses, because I am an artist. I do like to make time lapses. Thank you so much to my amazing patrons, who I appreciate the ever-loving out of, for supporting the ever-loving out of me, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.